Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another artist conversation as a part of the Expressive Creative Soul art exhibition at the Bridge Art Gallery. Tonight, we are pleased to be joined by sculptor and conceptual artist Philip A. Robinson Jr. His work explores the intersection of history, identity, and cultural narrative through the language of materials. Phil is known for his striking sculptural works that combine natural wood and mirror finished stainless steel, inviting viewers to see themselves reflected within the artwork while engaging deeper questions about culture and identity. His practice often uses wood to symbolize the passage of time and the historical forces that shape both popular and marginalized cultures. So, this evening we'll explore his piece called Old Talks with New Icons, a work that reflects his ongoing interest in how the conversations of the past continue to shape the icons and identities of the present. So please join me in welcoming the one and only Philip A. Robinson Jr. Hello, Phil. How are
Can you see
you?
that? Can you see me on the screen?
Yes, I can see you on the screen.
Very good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little staticky, but I think we can work with it a little bit.
All right.
So you're currently in your studio?
Currently in my studio and classroom here in Portland, Oregon, in PDX.
All right. So you made the journey from the East Coast to the West Coast.
That's right. Over here now, it'll make 4 years that we moved over here to the West Coast, but still working bi-coastal on East and West Coast.
Do you find, I know we're going to get into a little bit more of your history, but do you find the art scene in Portland different than the East Coast?
Yes and no. There are a lot of artists, believe it or not, out here that show on the East and West Coast. There are a lot of artists over here that are represented by galleries in New York City. And so there's the same happening that was happening in New York is happening here as well. And it's been a time to kind of navigate those spaces and meet those individuals and build connections and community. And so now being 4 years in, happy to say that I feel like we have that. Just a note, I'm seeing that on my screen where it says my name, it is black. But I want to make sure that you can see me. Is that the case?
Yeah, we can see your name and everything, and I can see you too.
Cool.
All right, awesome. So let's get into a little bit about your artistic journey and influences. So for audiences who may be encountering your work for the first time, can you share a little bit about your artistic journey and what led you to sculpture as your primary medium?
Always loved working with my hands. I was a very hands-on kid growing up. I was in the New York Times when I was in preschool for working with worms and finding worms and things like that. And so I like building things. I love making things. And I would be the student that would build sculptures for English class or make something for social studies. And so my mom saw that and she really told me to kind of pursue that. And sculpture was the biggest thing for me where I could actually see myself making what I wanted to make through my hands. I didn't realize I was an artist till about junior year in high school and really decided that I wanted to go forth with that and kept on doing it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So wood plays a central role in your work. What drew you to working with wood as your primary material, and exactly what was it about wood that spoke to you as you were, developing your art style and your art practice?
As I moved on from high school to undergrad. I went to Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs, New York. I started off in ceramics. I love ceramics, still a medium where I can utilize my hands and build what I wanted to. And then from there, I went to metal, and I was working strictly in metal and metalworks and welding and plasma cutting and all these things. I did that when I went to graduate school, Mason Grove School of the Arts. I continued to work in metal, solely in metal. Um, and then when I graduated from graduate school, had this harsh reality that I no longer had space or the tools at my, you know, readily available to me that I could continue on with metal. I didn't have a foundry. I didn't have a plasma cutting machine. Back then, plasma cutting machines were very expensive. Uh, it wasn't easy to just pick one up, and then you had to have ventilation, all these types of things. I had none of that. But what I did have was I was living out of my home, and I had extra room space, and so I turned a bedroom into a studio space and decided that I would go pick up some kind of wood tools and still kind of create what I wanted to create out of metal, but utilize wood instead. And so that kind of started my journey over the next 15 years on really figuring out the nuances of wood, how wood works, what types of wood there are, where do they come from, what is the history on all different types of wood, hard woods, soft woods, how to put them together, how to take them apart. And then about 6 years ago, finally was able to get back to the metal and kind of blend the two together, my loves of metal and wood.
So initially, working with wood started out kind of as somewhat of a default because of space and access to tools. But were you pleasantly surprised that it ultimately became, this material that allowed you to dig deeper as an artist?
Yeah, I felt like I had to take a step back in order to move forward.
Mm.
Um, you learn when you're coming up in terms of the medium of wood and metal, and also this idea of sculpture, starting off with more malleable materials and then working your way through to harder materials, right? So working with clay, easily put things together, take things apart. Then you have foam, then to plaster, plaster to wood, wood to uh, metal, metal to stone. So there's this progression that you learn on how to do not only relief carving, but more forgiving materials. And so
Mm.
it was refreshing in a way to be able to leave metal, learn through the wood, and then be able to come back to the metal with a new idea and new ways to approach it. And also the similarities that we have, not only to wood and metal, but also how they play a role in our society in terms of, civilizations, in terms of wealth, all of these things.
And so, what about the when you're working in wood, kind of like the historical, archival, history aspect of wood, does that element of wood play into your creations?
So I was kind of in that in between point of out of graduate school, working in the studio, not really knowing where I wanted to go. Um, when I was asked to do uh, this position opened up, I should say, with a fellow artist of mine that she needed a kind of manager to help her as she was doing her work. And so she started to do a reverse migration tour from DC down to Florida and then back again, where she was collecting all these artifacts along her drive. And so I was kind of that driver and making these ways and kind of, helping to plan out our routes and things like that. And one of our stops, we were stopping at not only the Geechee Islands, but also Savannah.
Mhm.
And so in Savannah, we stopped off in the town, and we went to a lot of the historical Black churches where you would go in and look at the pews, and underneath the pews, they would have all of these markings within the wood. And these markings, whether it was a star or a line or some type of marking, would indicate where the slaves would be hiding. in the pews. Um, and then going from the churches to then going to some of the grave sites where they would show you these huge, massive weeping willow trees that would have these markings, these slashes on them. And they would remind us that these slashes are where the slaves were put up to the tree and then whipped. And these trees still having these slashes, years later within the trees, which really cemented to me the fact, I was working with wood at the time, but it cemented in my mind, kind of really seared in my mind, this idea of trees holding history, living historical monuments in this lumber. It really started me on my journey on why am I using wood, but also, dating the wood that I was using dendrochronology, with dating all the rings in the wood. Why is that important? Why is it important to know when a tree was, how long a tree's been alive on this earth, to when it was being cut down and I repurposed into the figures that I'm utilizing. All of that, has pertinence. And so I really started to dive into that from that excursion.
So before we get into your piece that's featured in the art exhibition, have you ever started out conceptually with an idea of what you wanted to do, and then got your hands on a piece of wood, and then as you started to like examine the wood and learn its history, its age, um, and where the wood, all of the history that's incorporated within the wood's past, that it kind of changed the trajectory of the work that you were going to do with the wood, just because of the stories that and the timeline within the wood itself.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've learned over my time of being an artist is that you may have an idea from, when you were 17, 18, that you'll only be able to realize now because you found the material and learned how to actually produce it, right? So I've got all these ideas that I have that, I may have in my mind and think about wanting to create, but I lack either the piece of wood that I need, the metal that I need, or how I want to create it. Vice versa, I might have a piece of wood that I go out and I source that I love, but I may not have the knowledge on how it's supposed to be utilized, right? So during my time of working with wood, I've also amassed a large number of lumber. It's in my studio space, it's in my house, it's all over the place. I have all of this lumber that I have, that when I have ideas, I can look through and see, do I have a piece that'll work for that? And a lot of the times I might have, sometimes I don't. And then I have to go back out and kind of source that material again. And then it takes time, right? I may have this idea where I've got this beautiful piece of wood for a pair of pants, but I don't have the top. So I got to go out and source the top. Or I've got this beautiful image of, the skin tone color for this type of wood, but I'm lacking the hair, you know what I mean? So I got to try and figure out how to put that all together. And sometimes it takes time. We're trying to find the right location, find the right piece of wood that has the right grain, that has the right tone, the right size, the right width. All of these things are factors that play into it. So it's not as easy with just coming up with an idea. It takes time to kind of go through, do I actually have the wood or metal that'll make this happen?
So you have become a wood aficionado at this point in your career. Um, so let's, dig into, in addition to hearing, your process, your story, I call it, origin story, as it relates to your art practice. But let's talk about the piece that is currently featured as a part of the 10th year of Expressive Creative Soul. And you've been a part of many of those years. So this particular piece is Old Talks with New Icons, and it features walnut, white oak, Brazilian wood, purple heart, a mirror finish, stainless steel, basswood frame, and this piece brings together your ongoing exploration of historical memory, correct? And
Correct.
contemporary cultural symbolism. So, Phil, the title itself, Old Talks with New Icons, suggests a dialogue between past and present, tradition and contemporary identities. Um, First of all, how did you come up with the title, and what does that phrase mean to you?
So I'll say this, which also ties into the title, is that I'm working in wood, but I'm constantly learning about the material still.
Hmm.
I'm 42 years old now. I've been in this game for a while, and yet I'm still surprised, right? I still learn while I'm in the industry that I'm in, and especially with the material that I'm utilizing. There are always those that have more knowledge than I because they've been in this industry for longer than I. And so being out here on the West Coast, and especially being in a space in Oregon where you had the Oregon Trail and the lumber companies and milling of the lumber, and really where the majority of wealth came from in this country in terms of the trees, there's so much history here that I've been able to learn about the wood. And a lot of the wood that's here also gets sourced from South America and Africa. So when you talk about this title, Old Talks with New Icons, we're talking about these conversations that are in rotation, right? That are generational, that we're still having with these entities, these icons that come in and out, of our journey, right? You have those that we look up to as heroes or heroines. We look at those that have taken a stand at a certain part of history or a stand at a certain aspect of history. And so these individuals, while they lack the flesh, they keep the clothing.
Hmm.
And knowing that clothing is non-binary, these pieces allow anyone to enter these spaces and see themselves represented in the clothing. I believe there were 11 in this series. They're all life size, so they're life scale in terms of being able to actually put yourself in through the image, and they're hung either from the floor up if they're a life size piece, or chest level so that you're able to really walk up to the piece and see yourself represented in the work. The mirror finished stainless steel obviously is in the background through this piece, but also pertinent in terms of why I wanted to give this piece for the 10-year anniversary was really, in conversation to what's happening currently within our society and here in America, where not only we had COVID, where you're dealing with masks and covering your face, but even now with ICE, covering their faces, and still on the shirt, you have human made in terms of the lettering on the clothing. And so this idea of what does that mean? You know, there's so much divisiveness happening currently in our society, and yet we're all human. But there's no empathy, there's no compassion. We've gotten overloaded with what we've seen on television and media. We've seen kids that are dying every day. We've seen, bombings, all these things, and you just become so numb to the aspect of all these things happening. And it's hard sometimes to really not only reflect on that, but look yourself in the mirror. And so these pieces, again, allow for those conversations, but also to have this continual happening when you go up and see yourself in the space, but then also see other people walking through the work. And so you're able to see multiple views and multiple standpoints.
And I love that because, we all have a role to play in society, and we're so, interconnected with one another. And you're right, from a, current events standpoint, a lot of our issues are still, old conversations that we continue to have over and over again, and not reaching, uh, a revolution or evolution in our thinking. And so we definitely need some new icons, new ideas, new ways of living without, constantly repeating this cycle itself. And so, when you're with all of your work, not just this piece, do you always want to, is it your intention to always incorporate a mirror image or a mirror element to it, to your artwork? Or was it just a part of like this series and some of the other series?
Representation has always been really key in my work because my audience has a very wide uh, gap in terms of a younger audience and an older audience. And so I want to have those generations having the same conversations and talking to one another within the work. So even if I'm not using mirror finished stainless steel, there's still some type of reflection happening within my work. Um, Whether it be sanding down the wood and using a patina that allows this type of glimmer, so you see some type of reflection, or the actual, mirror in the stainless steel. The series O Talks with New Icons has this in it. My series House of Regina had mirror finished stainless steel in it. The series Dendrochronology and Hydrohelix has mirror finished stainless steel in it. So there's multiple series that has kind of nuances. So I'm trying to play with utilizing these materials.
Do you feel that all of your work, including this piece, and is it your intention to always address, questions about identity and representation within culture?
As someone that's an educator and who teaches kids, if you can't see it physically, it's hard to believe that you can do it, right? Which is why the image of the young child touching President Obama's hair was so important, because in that moment, the switch happened for him, where he now realized that here is someone that looks like me, that has hair that feels like mine, in an area of which I never thought I could get to. And so that's why it's important for those to actually see it, right? If they don't see it, it's not something that their ceiling is much lower than what the ceiling actually should be for them. So yes, I always believe that there should be some form of representation within my work, because I'm showing my work in areas, museums, galleries, public spaces. And so, you know, I'm going to have little kids that come up to the work and, I want them to take away something that'll be meaningful for them.
I have a relative that, always had this saying, to, the younger generation in my family, that if your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, then surely, surely you can achieve it. And it, makes me think of that when you're saying, the idea of being able to see it, to visualize it, and know that it's, obtainable.
For sure.
So, with representation, identifying representation, addressing representation and identity in your work, is that a key component of your your approach to storytelling within your artwork, or do you have a different approach as it relates to storytelling?
I think it's important to note all the layers within the work, but I
Mhm.
also want, my viewers, to my audience, to make their own interpretations on what they feel like the work means for them. I think it's important to note the dendrochronology in the work, the counting of the rings in the wood. I think it's to note, the self-reflection, and especially within this piece. But also, to have those conversations of people walking by and seeing the work and, you know, taking away their own aspects on what they feel like the work represents for them. Somebody may see this and think that it's, a version of ice. Someone else may see this and think of COVID. Someone else may see this and think of, just putting something over your face, or, uh, hiding yourself, or um, protesting, or, there's many aspects to this work that people could take away from it. Um, and so as the artist, I think it's important to step back and allow them time and access to come away with their own interpretations.
Phil, we've been saying that, with so much going on in the world, that the role of the artist right now is so incredibly important. Because historians will give you facts about what did or did not happen, but the artists, through their artistry, are able to convey the sentiment of the people. So you spoke about when people experience this particular piece in the gallery, you want them to see themselves. Is there anything else that you want them to experience, um, or your hope or aspiration that you hope they what they experience when seeing this piece, this beautiful piece in person?
We artists have a responsibility to tell the truth historically. And we're in a very dangerous time right now where you could be on social media and see an image or see a video and not know whether or not it's AI or if it's truthful or if it's real. Artists have always had a responsibility to eloquently tell the truth about what is currently happening in the now. Um, and so I firmly believe that, you know, all artists during this period and this point in time are extremely important because we are going to be the ones that are going to be able to, you know, tell the truth from the fake of what's currently the reality of what's happening versus what's being fed to you via social media or through news channels or even through our current president. You know, I think it's important that artists are able to keep their voice. Artists are able to function in a space of honesty and truthfulness. And so when uh, you know, people walk through the doors and they're coming to see the exhibition and they're coming up to this piece, I want them to know that, you know, this piece was made back in, I believe it was what, 2020, 2021, something like that. And so here we are 5, 6 years later, right? And still having the same conversation, which
Mm.
again goes back into, you know, this old talks of new icons where now, you know, we're still in the same space. You know, we're still trying to change the way things are and make a difference. And yet the clothing remains, the scarf remains, the hat remains, the shirt remains. Only now it's a different individual taking up the reins.
Yes, unfortunately, the mask, 5, 6 years ago or 6 years ago, symbolized, our safety. And now the very same mask, represents terror for so many of us now, in a very short span of time. Um, you know, I never thought about, the idea, in an AI world, the importance of an artist and their work, now, because it's so weird that we see these images and videos on social media and we have to question what our eyes are seeing, if it's real or not, which is just such a weird thing to have to, to say and to think and to feel. But you can't deny when you see a beautiful piece of art like your work here and know that it's real. When you walk into the gallery, you know that it's real. And when you go to experience it, you see yourself literally within this piece. So thank you for, continuing to push the envelope and to use your creativity to demonstrate, to the viewing audience that um, be the importance of art especially in a ever evolving AI world. And this is why people should collect art so that they know they have the real thing in their homes.
Right on. I'd also add to that that you can also see how it was made by hand, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Another aspect that is still prevalent but slowly fleeting. That you know we have spaces where art is now being created digitally or you know by machine. So there's also that conversation of you know what still is fine art. You know, if we have collectors in terms of the collecting aspect, what are we collecting? What is still considered high value in terms of the art world? And also the idea of craft versus fine art, right?
Mm.
Having that conversation. So yeah, and that's a totally different, longer conversation. But absolutely, yeah, you know, viewers being able to come in and seeing that, you know, this was made by hand. This was touched, sanded, you know, developed by the artist's hand, and I can see that.
Yeah, we should actually do a whole conversation with several mixed media artists to talk about those who, practice, especially mixed media, the conversations that happen, in the art world around, that practice itself. So may have to bring in some other friends and have a vibrant conversation about that. So, Phil, in closing, if you can, tell our viewing audience where they can find you, where they can follow you, as well as what you're currently working on and where your practice is going in 2026.
For sure. Philip A. Robinson Jr. .com is my website, PHILIP Robinson, ROBINSONJR.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Philip A. Robinson Jr. Got a couple of shows coming up this year. Currently, I'm still have a show, obviously, with beautiful people over at the British Art Gallery. Also have work that is with the Tanya Wiedemeyer Gallery in Brooklyn. Over here on the West Coast, I have a couple of pieces that are with the Portia Studios out here, a winery called Eminent Domain in Newburgh. And then I have a couple other shows coming up soon. One in June out here in Portland. And then I'm working on two new series of works, one of which is going to be solely made out of metal, and then the other one that's also diving back into some wood aspects. So yeah, keep a lookout soon on more things coming down the pipeline, more shows coming up on the East and West Coast. And definitely follow along because it's going to be a good year in 2026. It's going to be a breakout year for sure.
Well, I'm excited to hear about this new series. Can't wait to show it, in the Bridge Art Gallery. And thank you so much, Phil, for spending time with us and sharing your origin story, how you approach your practice, how your practice approaches you, and the power of storytelling. We truly appreciate your time. Come down to the Bridge Art Gallery to see old talks with new icons at the Bridge Art Gallery as a part of Expressive Creative Soul. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Cheryl.